This is the Manila Bulletin, traversing time and truth since 1900. The newspaper with a century-long legacy of standing witness to the country's history and development. Today, the Manila Bulletin strives to make the nation be fully informed, and the Manila Bulletin will continue to inform, inspire, empower, telling timely stories and timeless truths through this century and beyond.
Ako si Gino, I'm the General Manager of Fundacion Enterprise, and we've been operating for almost 4 years. Kumuha kami ng mga viewers dito sa Gawad Kalinga Enchanted Farm to provide them livelihood through weaving. Napatrain namin sila through the partnership of Philippine Textile Research Institute. At mula noon, nagawa namin na mag-hobby ng iba't ibang designs. Dumating ang panahon na nagkaroon kami ng problema dahil kakaunti lamang ang nakaka-appreciate ng mga nagagawang tela ng mga weavers natin. Papasalamat kami dahil nakilala namin ang Bio Foundation. Marami ang nagbago. Napaka-revolutionary ng aming ginagawa. Unang-una, ang ginagamit naming materials ay polyester. Ngunit tinuruan kami na gumamit ng ibang material na talagang sustainable. Ngayon, gumagamit kami ng cotton, tinuruan kami gumamit ng mga textile offcuts para magkaroon ng supplementary weft doon sa ating tela na ginagawa. Maraming natututunan ng aming weavers sa mga design, sa mga colors na nilalagay nila doon sa paghahabi. Talagang nag-evolve ang aming ginagawa dito sa paghahabi dahil nagkakaroon kami ng knowledge along the way habang kami ay nakikipag-collaborate with Bio Foundation. At isa pa, ang aming materyales ay sigurado na ito ay local. Galing dito kay Habi na talaga namang kami ay sumusuporta sa prinsipyo ng sustainability. Dumating ang Bio Foundation, mas ramdam namin na kasama kami sa circle ng network na natutulungan nila. Mas ramdam namin na na-empower kami kasi na-witness namin na hard work, yung craftsmanship ng weaving ay talagang may potential. Nakikita namin yun doon sa mga produkto na ginagawa nila.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the MAID Spectrum Lecture Series. Today marks the return of MAID's annual lecture series after the COVID-19 pause. The global pandemic has severely affected the art and design industry. But if there's anything we have come to realize, it's that creativity persists even during crisis. In fact, creativity provides us with practical solutions to real-world problems and innovations that change the way we experience the world. Even in crisis, the spectrum of possibilities in art and design remain limitless. Join us in discussing by leaving us your comments and questions, and you could be one of the two lucky winners of the limited edition MAID merchandise featuring this year's winning artworks. Participants who are able to complete our lectures may also request for certificates after the event. Helping us empower creatives through today's event are our advocacy partners, The Rank Magazine and Bio, who are dedicated in uplifting the lives of Filipino artists. Visit their social media platforms at Bio Clothing and at Rank Magazine to learn more. The representative of the 4th District of Pangasinan, the Honorable Congressman Christopher Toff de Venecia.
Good day to everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank Aniceto M. Sobrepena and Luis Lane Calicdan of the Metro Bank Foundation, Inc. for giving me this opportunity to have this opening message. Once again, for the benefit of those who don't know me, I am Toff de Venecia, currently serving as Congressman of the 4th District of Pangasinan and Chairperson of the Special Committee on Creative Industry and Performing Arts in the Lower House. I'm also the lead convener of the now 60-member Arts, Culture, and Creative Industries Block of the 18th Congress, or ACHIB. Before becoming a public servant, I was also involved in the creative industries myself, having been a film and television actor as a child, and then a theater actor, director, and producer. I was also lifestyle editor of Chalk Magazine and contributing editor for the Philippine Star's Young Star section. So I got to work extensively with various stakeholders from the creative industries, from filmmakers, visual artists, fashion designers, chefs, and many more. From my experience in both capacities as legislator and stakeholder in the creative industries, I realized just how important the creative economy is and how big of an impact it is for our country. The pandemic has destroyed millions of lives and continues to do so every day on so many different levels. Aside from its effects on the health of those unfortunate enough to have caught COVID-19, the pandemic has also disrupted the livelihood of so many workers in the creative industries. For months, people were stuck in their own homes in an effort to avoid public spaces and social gatherings. Even if they wanted to go out, there was virtually nowhere to go anyway. The lockdown implemented to help curb the spread of the pandemic has led to the closure of cinemas, bars, theaters, and other places where people gather to consume creative content, to socialize, and generally live their lives to the fullest. Although necessary to avoid contracting the disease, living in isolation has ironically brought about threats to our mental health. Cabin fever, a condition characterized by feelings of anxiety, restlessness, decreased motivation, and in worse cases, even depression, has become an issue. So what helped us get through such a great ordeal? Culture and the arts. They have certainly played an integral part. Throughout the lockdown, many of us were fortunate enough to have access to television and Netflix subscriptions, develop artistic hobbies, learn new things through reading, which definitely helped us cope as we went through the height of the public health crisis. Most of those media fed our minds through the power of art. As I have said in my opening messages a few days ago, culture and the arts have the power to change lives. At the moment, people enjoy having fun, being with other people, and expressing themselves creatively. Then there are the long-term impacts like shared memories, increased empathy, and a broader worldview. People who participate in culture and the arts are more likely to be in good health, go on to further education, volunteer, and donate to charity. It's therefore right that young people should be a target audience for arts engagement, efforts to encourage a lifelong love of culture and the arts. These young people will be our future poets, sculptors, filmmakers, musicians, and artists. That is why the programs initiated by Metro Bank Art and Design Excellence is truly a remarkable thing, as it gives a platform for our young creatives to develop their crafts. In the uncertain times of the crisis, where all the familiar things have acquired a new reading, this exhibition and program gave a unique opportunity for young artists to share their ideas and opinions not only about the COVID 19 crisis, but also regarding the shape of the future, introducing them as torchbearers for peace, resilience, and support. I toast to this wonderful event that makes us work together in giving our many creative industries the support and recognition these young artists and creatives deserve. As I have mentioned in my plenary speech a week ago, a creative future should not be left to chance. It is planned, not dreamed. It is organized, not whimsical. It is taken seriously and not treated as an afterthought. After all, a creative future is safe, sustainable, and happy for all. Because truly, hashtag the future is creative. Congratulations to everyone.
Thank you to our guest of honor, the Congressman Christopher De Venecia, for that inspiring message that sets the tone for our discussions for this afternoon. Art and design truly are vital tools in building a better normal. We are lucky to have today as speakers two creative professionals who were instrumental in creating a better normal for all of us. Our first speaker sets the bar for overcoming the formidable challenge of keeping art spaces alive even during lockdown. Today, he talks to us about how the team of Fundacion Sanso managed to continue bringing art to the public in the middle of a pandemic. Joining us is the director and curator of Fundacion Sanso, Mr. Ricky Francisco. A museum worker, he is also engaged in various art-related consultancies with private institutions and galleries, locally and internationally. He is a regular facilitator in the Call Asia program, a program funded by Getty Foundation under the ICROM to teach preventive conservation to Southeast Asian museum workers.
Magandang hapon po. Thank you to the organizers for allowing us to share our experience at Fundacion Sanso. This afternoon, I will share with you how we have been affected by the pandemic and how we were able to work despite everything that happened. So I hope you'll bear with me. I'm not very techy, so this is quite a first for me. So I'll be sharing a PowerPoint and share our experience. I hope you'll find some worth in what we have done. So let me start off with that I'm very honored to be part of this series of Spectrum, the Art of Possibilities. And I love the tagline, Infinite Possibilities in Art and its Power to Nurture, Liberate, and Heal. I hope that with our sharing this afternoon, we will be able to share just that. So I work for Fundacion Sanso. It's a small, not-for-profit foundation which runs a museum in San Juan. Other than that, it's all about the man in the photo in the center, Mr. Juvenal Sanso. Our mandate is to preserve and promote his legacy. This photo is from our archives, and Mr. Sanso is flanked by his friend, national artist Arturo Luz for the visual arts, and national artist IP Solyonko for architecture and landscape design, I think. So that photo came from our archives. We have an archive of all of Mr. Sanso's photos and correspondences and doodles and drawings and posters, and that informs a lot of our exhibitions and events. We also have a very small library of books that have been collected by Mr. Sanso. And we run a museum. So that means we have a collection of around 600 works by Mr. Sanso, 600 paintings at least, and around 1,000 cliché verre and other works. And we derive products out of this. We also give authentication services for those who collect Mr. Sanso's works. And as part of the foundation, we also offer scholarships and grants to our chosen communities. And we have the Sanso Idea platforms, which strengthens the various thrusts that we have, which ultimately lead to the preserving and promoting of Mr. Sanso's legacy. But also, of course, integral to this is educating the public about his works and about his life and values, and making sure that the needs of our communities are met, or at least we try, and that all of what we do is sustainable. So entrance to Fundacion Sanso is free, and we're open from Monday to Friday now, at least now that there's this GCQ, Monday to Friday from 10 to 4. So this is old, but we're still free. And this is from our archives. So we have a lot of these old photos. You could see Mr. Fernando Amorsolo in the center with a tie, and Mr. Sanso is behind him as a student, because he was a student in UP in the 1948 to 1951. So the archives has a lot of photos which not only tells us about Mr. Sanso's life, but also gives us a glimpse into the person that is Mr. Sanso. So our goal is to present not only his works, but also his values and his life. And we use the archives as material for our social media, for our exhibitions, and other things that we do. We hold exhibitions in the museum. All of them are curated. We often base it on our collection, but we also have guest artists who interact with the works, who have some connection to what Mr. Sanso is doing. So this is another exhibition. We change exhibitions around every 3 to 4 months. But we also go out, because we know that we are in San Juan and it's not central. We also try to go out. So this was in Art Fair in 2019, Art Fair Philippines 2019, where we exhibited a lot of his etchings so that we could educate the public more about the other works of Mr. Sanso, that it's not just his paintings, but also etchings, paintings on slides, and commercial works, applied arts. So we do not, we embrace technology. So during Art Fair in 2019, we had augmented reality and virtual reality as part of the exhibition. And we also go out on malls. We're not shy in doing this because we want more people to access Mr. Sanso's art. This was in Mega Mall in September 2019, where we had a big exhibition based on the friendship of Mr. Sanso and Mr. Henry C., which ran for more than 7 decades. And it's partly the reason why there is an art walk in Mega Mall. And we're not afraid of embracing things that make it more accessible to people and more experiential. So this is a photo booth where you're part of the painting of Mr. Sanso. Of course, this is just a reproduction. And we also always try to educate people about Mr. Sanso or an aspect of his life in all of these things. So we have a timeline of the friendship of Mr. Sanso and Henry C. in this booth. We also make products, because for us, products are a way for people to connect with Mr. Sanso, and they could bring home their experience or a memory of their experience whenever we have these events through the products. And we also have a shop because of that inside the museum. And we've also migrated online on Facebook and Instagram so that more people could get access to these products, which we think are a good way of educating people about the different styles of Mr. Sanso and about the different things that he made during his active career. One of the most essential things that we do is the authentication services so that people do not buy fakes. Fakes destroy the reputation of the artist. They destroy the legacy. So this is one of the most important things that we do. We inform the public that there are fakes and let them see what they are so that they will know not to buy these things. Yeah. And we also offer a secure certificate of authenticity with a lot of features that would not be easily replicated so that the public or the collectors are more aware and more secure that their artworks are real. So we also educate using online media such as Facebook and Instagram. And we have different topics such as this one on authenticity, which we recently had. Aside from that, we give a lot of grants and scholarships to our chosen community. So for our first grant is a scholarship program, a stipend program actually, for fine arts students in the Bulacan State University. We've also given small micro grants to artists, and we've also had a recent curatorial grant with Dr. Dayang Iraula as our first recipient. But the scholarships and grants, such as the one in Bulacan State University, has enabled us to graduate 7 scholars already, and we're taking on around I think we have around 10 in our current roster. So we don't just give them money, but we also give them the chance to exhibit in Fundacion Sanso and also outside Fundacion Sanso, and we give them mentorship with established artists and other members of the artistic community. So here they are with their friends, and this was part of the exhibition Emerge, the first batch of our scholars here at Fundacion Sanso. So we also cater to different communities such as young artists. One of the things we did was Art in the Garden in partnership with ONO, a project of Linky Sumbing Ramilo, where the young artists could sell their works here at Fundacion Sanso and get to keep 100% of it, of the sales, and they also get to meet the collectors. So that was intended so that the artists and collectors get to know each other, because in the art world, oftentimes the artists are not even aware of who collect them. So this was a vital link so that they would get to know each other better. So we also have, for example, this batch of LaSalle. LaSalle is here in the Green Hills area, which is our area. So we sometimes have events. We used to have events with them here at the museum where we educate them about art, and they have a gathering here from time to time. The person in green is our mayor, who is also from LaSalle. So another community that we cater to is our own barangay, and in 2019 we were able to give them a hospital bed so that they have something in the clinic, additional bed in the clinic in the barangay. We also have other partnerships with the barangay. One of them, which the pandemic stopped, was educating the elementary school teachers in art education, how to teach art, because most of them are not fine arts graduates, but they're from I think physical education. So teaching them how to teach art would have been crucial. However, this was stopped because of the pandemic. So this was the bed which the barangay received. So another group that we focus to are people with for mental health. Mr. Sanso was a trauma victim. During World War II, he was deeply traumatized. So he used his art to be able to release all that trauma, and it's like therapy for him. So we've partnered with different mental health practitioners over the years so that we could have a focus on this issue and bring awareness about it. So thankfully, na-recognize naman ng mga dyaryo yung ginagawa namin, much in part with our partner, Nana Nadal, who was our partner for this series of talks. This is in partnership naman with Gang Badoy, and through art and through crafts, we could focus on anxiety naman. So may mga ganito kaming mga programs that are not too highbrow pero fun and anyone can do. But then after 2019, we all know this, nag-pandemic. So this is how it affected us. The first few days of the pandemic, of course, were days of uncertainty. We all know how this went. We all went into ECQ. A lot of doctors were affected. A lot of nurses died. And we stayed home. We were prepared for 2 weeks. We were not prepared for it to be that long. But the pandemic also brought out a lot of good, the best in us. So, for example, we saw how Kuya Robert would share his skills in drawing so that the kids will do something at home. And there were all of these other initiatives that were geared towards our frontliners. So kahit si Metrobank nagbigay ng tulong para makaangat tayo. So parang bayanihan. Yeah, tapos we've risen above our circumstances so that we could all survive together. Personally, sa akin, during the first weeks after the pandemic, the weeks that we were not prepared for, I had to go out. Kita ko syempre yung ibang-iba na yung EDSA, walang tao, walang sasakyan. Tapos hindi pa tayo nagmamasks noon pero ni-require na rin ng mga institutions like Mercury na masks. Hindi pa natin alam yung face shields back then eh. It was all new to us. Tapos mga banks were closed. Despite that, we were able to cope. This is how it affected what we were doing. So during the first month after the lockdown, we focused on mental health. So we created a series of talks which spoke about the time. So we had an online talk with Mindful Manila, Crisis and Opportunity. We had a talk with Rock Ed kay Gang Badoy, how understanding abstract art can help during a lockdown, paano mag-de-stress. Tapos, of course, we need to focus on how to take care of our elderly's mental health. Siyempre, ibang-iba na yung mundo at hindi sila sanay. So, yun yung mga tipo ng mga programs na ginawa namin during the first part. And we continue to do it. So like this Sanso Idea platform, the launch of Mortem's Embrace, which deals with grief naman, with Eloy Francisco Rivera and Aldi Aguirre. And we've learned to use online media to stage exhibitions. This was in partnership with Gallery Joaquin, and this was to raise funds for the PGH. And thankfully, may connection pa rin siya with what we do. It's about preserving and promoting the legacy of Mr. Sanso. So it was an homage to Mr. Sanso by various artists, and we were able to raise quite a sizable amount that was donated to the PGH Foundation for their needs, mga PPEs, ng mga doctors. We were also able to launch our very first curatorial grant awardee exhibition. So nagkaroon kami ng online exhibit about the cliché ver or yung painted slides ni Mr. Sanso. At meron kaming na-digitize dito na yung aming galleries, naging 360 through the help of Dr. Dayang Iraola and of course the artists who were part of the exhibition. And we were able to even have a catalog with a USB for that. All courtesy of Dr. Dayang Iraola. Kami lang yung funding at yung konting archival material for her research. So during the time that we were allowed to get back to work, Of course, dati hindi pa natin masyadong gamay pero may mga testing kami para kahit paano meron kaming magawang bubble. And nag-adapt na rin tayo ng technology kung paano yung protocols, paano tatanggap ng mga bisita. Nakakatuwa kasi na-inspired din kami sa trabaho ni Mr. S, yung artist, tignan nyo. Meron siyang sarili niyang way of keeping safe. Tapos sinunod namin yung protocol na required ng gobyerno, yung face mask, face shield, social distancing, at saka yung special na pag-transition, yung mga schedules para merong teams kahit paano. If anything happens, there's always someone to man the museum. And we were able to have our first on-site exhibition in August of last year. Also an homage exhibition with Direct Louis Ignacio. And our guest of honor was no other than Mayor Isko Moreno. So nakakatuwa kasi it was his way of interacting with Mr. Sanso and his works. Direct Louis acknowledges that Mr. Sanso is one of his idols in art. So nakagawa siya nitong exhibit na to at ginawa namin parang dialogue between Mr. Sanso and Direct Louis' art. At ang title ng exhibition ay Deep Expressions, pero yung pagkakasulat niya ay Depression. Kung titingnan niyo pag tinanggal niyo yung red na letters, Depression yung mababasa. Naging launch din ito noong short film na ginawa ni Direct Louis. Ito yung naging international launch ng short film na nanalo ng ilang awards. So mental health pa rin, connected pa rin talaga siya. And then we had another homage exhibition, The Blissful Expanse of Sea and Sky with Kenneth Montegrande. And he was able to do a collaborative work with Mr. Sanso. An unfinished work by Mr. Sanso was authorized to be done into an interactive work with Kenneth Montegrande. And this was auctioned off so that we could raise funds for our scholars. And it was enough to fund 6 scholars sa program namin. And kami rin yung among the very first museums here in the Philippines to come up with our own line of masks and products that are related to what we are going through right now. So makikita niyo yan, they're collectible masks, 200 pieces lang ang bawat design. Tapos nag-adapt din kami syempre sa needs natin ngayon na most of us are indoors. Itong bag na to, you could color it. So ang idea namin is that mothers could color it with their children. Tapos ito last Valentine's Day, since ngayon uso na yung stay home, we thought of how to make it special for mothers during Valentine's Day or yung mga loved ones. Nakapack na dito yung mask at saka yung flowers, inspired ng flowers kasi these flowers show that you care. You want them to be protected. Parang ganyan. Tapos, we also reached out to other museums that were closed during the ECQ, and we were able to have an online book fair, and we were able to sell quite a number, and we were able to support other museums this way by selling their products and giving them yung kita. During the pandemic, dahil most of us were indoors, we were also able to publish La Definitiva Sanso, the first coffee table book in like 30 years about Mr. Sanso. So it covers his work from 1980s to the present, to the time he retired. And very recently, we launched another book, After the Deluge Comes the Dawn, which is inspired by the optimism of Mr. Sanso's works. So here we are signing the books, and we were able to send them. These are the books that we sell about Mr. Sanso so that we can preserve and promote his legacy. But it's not just about selling. To preserve the legacy of Mr. Sanso, we've donated these books to the following institutions so that the students who study art in them or the visitors who visit these libraries and offices will get to know Mr. Sanso better. And these are donations, free. Another focus that we've done during the pandemic is the aid project. Parang saklolo, aid, no? Parang ganyan. So Art Plus Design Equals Empowerment Project is a series of exhibitions which focuses on artists and designers who use their skills to empower communities. Our first guest artist was BDBD. She is a farmer slash artist, and we call her an artivist kasi she's able to share her design skills so that the women, the wives of farmers in Baao, Camarines, sa Bicol, would have other sources of livelihood during the pandemic lalo. Pero she was doing this way before pa. And through her skills, na-empower yung community na yun. Our next one is Miss Melissa Yung Yap. And her community naman is weavers, of indigenous weavers. So andyan yung mga tinalak at saka yung mga baskets from the Palawan. And she incorporates them into her art so that there will be a steady market for their works, which became very essential kasi namatay ang tourism during the pandemic. So through her efforts, through her art, nabigyan sila ng livelihood. And as a result of the exhibition at Fundacion Sanso, napagawa ng weavers itong kanilang weaving facility sa South Cotabato. Bilang part ng community, sumali rin kami sa community pantry, nagbigay kami ng ilang sako ng bigas sa barangay. Tapos gumawa rin kami ng fundraiser for Museo Pambata kasi reliant sila sa mga dalaw ng mga school children, and of course, all tours are suspended. So because it's been more than a year, medyo nahirapan sila. So for us, nag-reach out kami at nakapag-raise kami ng 300,000 pesos for them. And of course, we have to focus on our scholars too. Charity begins at home, ika nga. Instead of the usual grants lang that we give for yung stipends nila for school and supplies, naggumawa kami ng Premyo Sanso, the very first art competition for our scholars. The winners get cash prizes, as well as mentoring and an exhibition in a commercial art gallery so that they get the chance to experience all of this. Plus, meron pa silang cash. So the winner was Justin Angelo Vital, and nakakuha siya ng trophy and 50,000 pesos for his artwork. And I hope it's still safe in Bahay Kubo. So yung exhibit na to was at Fundacion Sanso, pero all our exhibitions have online components, online launches and programs. Tapos ito naman yung exhibition nila sa Gallery Stephanie, which became our partner for this program. So far, yun lang po muna ikukwento ko. Baka naganda na meron tayong discussion or Q&A. Thanks again sa Metrobank at sa MAID for allowing us to share our story. I hope we're all safe. Thanks.
Thank you, Sir Ricky, for taking us through the journey of how Fundacion Sanso turned challenges into opportunities. Today's second speaker also brings with him stories of how design can be used to respond to the needs of society. He joins us today to share how architecture was at the front line in responding to the COVID-19 crisis. Architect William P. Jr. is a multi-awarded architect and urban planner. As the principal architect of WTA Design Studios, he leads a group of architects, interior designers, urban planners, and engineers in a wide range of socially relevant design activities with a focus on building better cities. At the height of the pandemic, the WTA Architecture and Design Studio built emergency quarantine facilities to respond to the urgent need for temporary healthcare facilities. WTA's EQF project was shortlisted in the 2021 World Architecture Festival.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be able to be here with everyone today to share, what we've done during this pandemic and, ideas about how we creatives are really important, in helping out our society, especially in challenging times. Our story really for the EQF begins with, of course, with our office, and the people there. We're WTA Design Studio, and we're a relatively young firm. And that being said, we kind of like always try to pursue experimental topics and all those things, right? So just to give you a background, we focus our work in the city of Manila. And if you look at Metro Manila, it's this incredibly huge urban region. The city of Manila itself is the densest city in the world. And Mega Manila, or NCR Plus, as we know it today, houses about 28 to 30 million people. So that being said, there's no blueprint for how we can make mega cities like this successful. So it's extremely relevant for us to be able to kind of like figure out how we can move forward, especially after this pandemic, and what our built environment will be like, how we can develop our human environment to better, serve us or our purposes. I grew up in the city of Tondo. This red line here, that's basically my daily route, from our home to our office to my school. This is my house, and our office and our school. So, growing up in Manila, you see things, right? The things that you see every day are, the immense number of people in the streets, and how fun it is actually to have, these very tactile, very human things all around you. And for me, that's always been the beauty of our city, where you can see people playing basketball in the streets, where you have a sari store in every corner that you kind of like always prefer. It's so easy, it's so accessible. And being a Manileño means being able to live shoulder to shoulder, especially when you're taking a jeepney, we're all just riding together. And everywhere in Manila, you can basically see these two structures. You can find a chapel and you can find barangay halls. What this means is that the two biggest institutions in our country have learned that to be able to be closer to people, they have to be everywhere. They have to be at the front lines. And so that's kind of like the background or the context from which we grew, our ideas about social architecture. Social architecture is this kind of like advocacy we're pushing of how we can move forward. And what it means is that, it's about building hyper local spaces, making them convenient and immediate. It's about allowing for freedom of movement, removing barriers. And it's about social scale, the idea that we should be building with a community in mind. And so these things kind of like led us to this experiment or like exploratory project that we did for Anthology Festival last February. We were thinking, what is architecture really? Is architecture the piece of paper that we see when we start drawing, right? Is it the drawings or is it the structure, right? And so we were thinking maybe the architecture is kind of like a blend of both, and it's actually just a process. And with very simple drawings, if the architects were themselves building the structures, then we can come up with beautiful structures in a very short amount of time. We can be very flexible, and we can kind of like embrace, the site or the context in which we build. Now, what happened was like, I think right after the festival, last March 12th, our city was placed under lockdown. So when this happened, I think around March 24th, hospitals started, releasing memos saying that they were filling up, and hospitals started refusing patients. And so, this was the world we were living in. It's a world of fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, and it's kind of continued to this very day, right? So, of course, with the rising cases worldwide and with the Philippines, catching up, we kind of like we're trying to figure out, okay, so what can we do? How can we help? Of course, architects, we always say that if you scratch off, the veneer of an architect, behind it, you'll actually find a socialist, right? And, we are always very in touch with the urban condition, with our societal problems. And so we all try to help. We were building, our colleagues were building acrylic boxes, these face shields, disinfection tents, and all those things. But I started to kind of like ask myself, as an architect, what is it really that we can do? How can we help? And we felt like maybe we can build more. We can build for our community. So I think around March 24th, we started to have this kind of like first discussion with friends of ours. I touched base with a doctor friend of mine from childhood. Got in touch with our friends in the armed forces, and we started to talk and discuss how we can actually augment the capacity of our hospitals. And once we decided on that very night, the next day we started to design and form our teams. We started to raise funds. We started to source materials because at that time, it was really the height of lockdown. There was nothing open, so we had to actually borrow army trucks to pick up goods and all those things. And we started construction on March 28th. And our idea was that for us to be able to provide emergency relief, to be able to build immediate capacity for our hospitals. In 5 days, we should be able to build these facilities. So on April 1st, we managed to build, the first EQF. But while building the first EQF, we quickly realized that the demand was much more. So we had to reprogram ourselves with the idea of, instead of building prototypes, we had to ramp up, production of these facilities because everyone was basically calling us. We built for every single city in the metropolis. And so pretty soon we were looking at building 20, 60, and more facilities actually. So this was the first EQF that we built. This was for the Manila Naval Hospital. And why we need to build EQFs is because we always say that the best way really to fight this pandemic is to isolate and then contact trace, right? But we forget that the vast majority of our population lives in spaces like this. This is Tondo last April, where we were building there. And, sometimes it's really not easy, to say isolate when a lot of our people don't have that space, right? We need to be able to find space for everyone in our communities. We need to build for everyone. And so we were thinking, before these like centralized mega facilities can be built, what can we do immediately, right? And what's the beauty of building hyper-local spaces? We can build something that is near. We build it near the hospital, in the hospital, so it's familiar. It's the first place you go to when you're sick. It's more accessible to you because it's in your community. And it's immediate, it's in operations right after you finish in 5 days. And so, that being said, we were able to, build so much and help immediately, especially for those that were needing it. So this is an EQF. It's pretty small. It's a 6 meter by 24 meter 26 meter structure. Basically, you have 3 parts. You have the nurse station, you have the wards where you have the rooms, then you have the toilet amenities, right? The idea is that it's designed to provide, a singular airflow. It's designed to kind of like provide privacy and yet allow people to be able to see outside with windows and not feel, trapped inside solid walls and opaque tents, And it's a very simple drawing, really, with very few parts. You have a skin, you have a structure, you have the strategy of how to keep it safe, and this scale that we kind of like latch onto the scale of 16 beds because it can be adapted and operational quickly by different hospitals. So the materials we use are very modular. We use wood, which is everywhere, and you can see each module here and how many modules each facility is actually made up of. The main focus for building the EQFs was speed and scalability. We needed to build something fast because the need is immediate. It's an emergency. It needs to be modular, so it can fit anywhere. The size can adjust. We need to use available materials. So we use wood and plastic because these are materials you can find anywhere in our country, in any island. And these are materials that are very forgiving. If you make a mistake, you cut a new piece, right? And it's also very scalable because it's very simple. You don't need special training. You don't need equipment. You can build it with your hands. So everyone in any community can build one. It's very adaptable. Like the design itself makes use of whatever materials. Like we had some that used tarps. We had some that used metal sheets. And, this really addresses this very urgent need for more and more facilities, especially during that time. And you can see here, like in 5 days, how a simple EQF structure can be built and finished. And so how do you build one? First, we lay out, the flooring. So we use recycled shipping pallets, so we can be able to put all the pipes and all the utilities underneath. Then we put up the framework with lumber, and then we put in the skin. We put in insulation, we put in a metal roof, and then we place the walls. We use plastic sheets from Dow Chemicals, and then we put in the flooring. So, and then another day or two, you put in, the water closets, the lavatories, the air conditioning, and you're done. So, it's really about, building something for the community. But more importantly, it's the community itself who's building. All the conversations we had when we were building this was about how can we actually learn from the builders themselves, right? So when you have architects and creatives on site trying to come up with new ideas of how to build things faster, build things better, make things more economical. And, it makes it so much better, really the feeling of coming together for a community. And it sort of like answers what role architects play in our communities, not just architects, but any creative actually. The core team of the EQF was made of architects, a doctor, professors, and then soldiers. Kind of like the basic elements for what you need in a small village, right? And it really does take a huge village. It really takes a whole village to be able to build this. You need architects to be on site in every project so we can adjust, so we can quickly decide on what to build. We need a technical team to be able to provide support for all the different teams that we're building during the pandemic. We need to be able to bring in builders. We need to raise funds. I think we were able to bring in about 500 workers at one point during the height, and 28 different teams. You needed to raise, I think, about 60 million pesos or something like that to be able to complete all 75 facilities. And, we need the help for armed forces of our soldiers. It's amazing how fast they can actually build. And, the help of the medical frontliners, our doctors who constantly allowed us to iterate and develop the ideas of how we can build things better. And architects also kind of like serve as this hub, where we kind of like we are able to bring together our suppliers or our vendors. If you can imagine, during the height of the pandemic, a simple staple or stapler is so hard to find. Everything is scarce, everything is locked down. But, as architects, that is our role. We design, we build, we share our ideas, and we bring people together. That's what shelter really means. It's a space for everyone. And, that's really the core idea of the EQF, the need to find space for everyone. More than anything, that is what a society should be about, taking care of everyone. And so we were able to kind of like build all these facilities. This was in Camp Crame. I think this was our biggest site for the Philippine National Police. We were able to kind of like, show light up the darkness. We always say, kind of like be able to show a way to say that we can move forward, we can do things even during the height of the pandemic. We don't need to kind of like just settle for what's there. We are doers, we are builders, and we have an important role to play in our society. And, we were able to reach out to our colleagues, other architects to be part of the team. And, different iterations came about. We were building in steel, in polycarbonate. We were able to make use of, basketball courts. This one here is in San Juan. To kind of like insert these spaces, we were able to build temporary housing for the medical workers. We were able to build a makeshift surgery room for the NKTI. And, this idea that all these facilities are there when it's needed, I think it's very fulfilling to imagine that, our small team, we were kind of like able to build all these 75 facilities all over our metropolis. And the idea is that, by outsourcing the plans, by making it available online, sharing it with everyone, our friends from Cebu were able to build in Naga, Davao, Pangasinan, and Cabanatuan. And you can see all the little quirks, the iterations, the creativity of making use of what materials they had in their spaces, in their places, and how this led to kind of like over 3,500 beds. I think we had corporations building. We had other colleagues building, and the LGUs slowly started to pick it up and build their own facilities. And we even reached all the way to Singapore, where our friends in Singapore were able to build another 3,000 beds. So all in all, our team, this is kind of like a snapshot of what an EQF is. It's just about using plastic, wood, and metal sheets. That's your structure. We were able to build 75 quarantine facilities, 1,239 beds. And with only 20 workers, you finish each facility in 5 days. And then the facilities can take on a various number of shapes. It can have from 16 to 30 beds. And so, we feel like the EQFs really, it's not, that's what architecture is. It's not about the structures we build, but it's, about this process. And it's about how we come together as a community and what we can do to kind of like help our communities, especially in times of crisis. And for us as architects, that's really our role in our communities. We are the builders. We are thinkers. We come up with ideas to help project what is needed by our communities. And so I leave you with that and maybe a short video that the guys can play for everyone.
Hi everyone, I'm William P. Jr. I'm the principal architect of WTA Architecture and Design Studio. So right now, during the lockdown, we're building these emergency quarantine facilities for our cities. We're building 65 of these facilities to fill about 1,000 beds. And we feel like this is our role as architects and builders, to provide shelter for our community, to provide space for all the patients who might need them. So this whole facility, it's made of wood and plastic. It's easy to build, it's lightweight. You can finish one of these in 5 days. And so the idea is that no man should be left without a space. And everyone can be assured of having somewhere to stay if they're sick. So hope everyone's keeping safe, take care, and stay home. Thank you.
Thank you, Architect William, for sharing the inspiring work that you do at WTA. After hearing our speakers, we now would love to hear your thoughts. So to kickstart today's question and answer, we chose several questions from our audience members who are now lucky owners of the Made Experience Hub. But first, let us welcome back our speakers, Sir Ricky Francisco and Architect William. Hello, Sir Ricky and Architect William.
Hi, Lalaine.
Hey,
Hi,
guys.
everyone.
Thank you for joining us today. So to kickstart this conversation, maybe we could try to talk about communities and survival. Both Fundacion and WTA talked about starting at home in your own foundations and in your own companies, but it would be essential to look at how you were able to be a catalyst for other communities coming together and giving back. So can you share with us how was your experience in pivoting those programs as well as considering the survival of your own communities in your own institutions? Maybe we could start with Fundacion.
Okay, thanks, Lalaine. For us kasi, communities are different groups of people, but we started by ensuring that our staff were safe. So even before the lockdown, we've started our own lockdown. Everyone had to go home earlier than the national lockdown, and we were able to get supplies. And throughout the ECQ, we were checking on each other every day. Meron kaming regular meeting just to check that everyone's okay. And after that, yun na rin yung planning namin to get off the ground. So we focused on different communities that we serve. First, our artistic community, and then our museum community, and then our artists, and then our scholars. So small groups lang, parang kahit paano, we could do something. Kasi the worst thing is to feel helpless. So we had to focus on what we can do. Yun lang.
Architect William?
Yeah, I think for us it's important really to be able to define or say what is actually a community, right? A community is a group of people, that grow closer together through shared experiences. It's about a group of people who have a certain identity because of the spaces they're in or the places they're at. For example, like a museum, a library, a church. These are spaces that define our community. And I think by being able to build together, with the people who are actually on the ground, then you are building a community because you're doing things together. That's really what bayanihan is, right? And that kind of like ties into our advocacy for why we do social architecture. And so while we've been building pop-up libraries, pop-up museums and exhibitions, I think we kind of like learned how to work more with people, how to reach out. And so it was from this idea that you can always do something, right? If you want to build the library, build one, right? So it's with this idea that we started building these facilities, that we're able to kind of like, okay, we can actually build these facilities, right? And then of course, once you start building, like I said, we were supposed to just build a prototype. And then of course, once the clamor or the need is there, and more people actually reach out to help also, and then you're able to kind of like grow this circle.
Right. It's nice to get the message that it takes a community, or it takes all of us to survive at the end of this civilization, to survive this pandemic, and highlighting the role of creative communities, creating and coming together. That's the central topic of what we want to talk about, and how both institutions considered surviving. I mean, let's be honest. I know a lot of institutions are in danger, are very vulnerable. So it's nice to hear that even with that vulnerability, you were able to extend your help externally, outside to the larger public. So let's talk about specific questions for Fundacion and then for WTA. So Sir Ricky, we are getting a lot of questions about what you discussed in Fundacion, specifically your program in authenticity. So Miss Erica Espulgar sent us a question over Facebook. How could an investor assure his work's authenticity if they are sold in secondary market or small art galleries? Authentication process takes time, and some collectors instantly just want to bring a particular piece at home. Those devoid of trained eyes might just miss the opportunity. So is a certificate a good supporting proof? Thank you. So what can we respond to, Ms. Erica?
Miss Erica, I'm sorry, but there's just no shortcut about it. Sometimes even certificates are being forged. So really, if you're really trying to secure your money's worth, you better check with other people who are knowledgeable. And unfortunately, that's a risk that we also have to take, missing out. You'd rather miss out on something naman kesa naman bumili ka and then it's a total waste. That would feel much worse.
And another one from Joshua Isaiah Balut. What is the most significant work or cultural contribution of Mr. Sanso to his generation, or maybe into this generation, and how can you describe his artistic expression?
Okay, that's a bit harder kasi Mr. Sanso is very dynamic. He changes his style so often, but there are two things that come to mind. First and foremost is that he used his art to transcend his limitations. He was able to heal himself of the trauma of World War II through self-expression. And I think that's something that we all could learn from at this point in time. We need to be able to express ourselves, our frustrations, our fears. We need to be able to connect with people because art is all about connection. And that's what we're trying to do here at Fundacion Sanso. We're trying to connect with other people, with small groups, para lang malaman natin we're not alone. So that's number one. And this second thing that Mr. Sanso gave to other artists of his generation and ours is that actually he was self-taught in many aspects. He wasn't schooled formally from elementary to high school. The first time he stepped in school was on second year college na he was accelerated. And a lot of the methods that he used were self-exploratory, experimentation, taking charge of his curiosity and really pushing it. So, dun tayo magaling. Mga Pinoy, magaling tayo dyan. So, I think we just have to follow yung ganong pattern that if there's something we're passionate about, there's something we're curious about, we have to put the time and the effort to make something really good out of it. And that's, I think, what Mr. Sanso was able to do for himself and could share with us.
Thank you, Sir Ricky. It's really nice how our topic, art and design during crisis, is now turning into trauma and healing through design and through art. So talking about design, Sir William, we have a lot of questions also for WTA. Also from Joshua Isaiah Balut, how many quarantine facilities have been built, and are those constructed in 2020 still being used? Are there still ongoing construction right now?
We personally, I think we built about 75 facilities, about 1,200 beds. Since we shared we open sourced the drawings online. I think, as far as we're aware, SMC, other corporations, they also built their own facilities. The other LGUs were able to build their own facilities. Of course, our colleagues from Cebu, Davao, like I said, also built their own. Over around 3,500 beds, I think, all in all. But I think probably more because it's still ongoing, if I'm not mistaken. Some of them are still in use. The one in San Juan, I know Ricky's pretty near here also. It's still there, still being used. Quite a number of them are still being used. So yeah, that's what's there right now.
And another inspiring question from Mark Delga, no? As an architect, how will the design and the layout architecture be affected by the COVID-19 pandemic moving forward? Are there any trends or changes in the way we design our spaces, not just living spaces, communal spaces, social spaces?
I think, in an ironic way, I think this pandemic has just kind of like pointed out the good things about good architecture, right? It's kind of like emphasized the need for open spaces, how we cannot be cooped up in four walls and a roof. So we all need parks, we all need public spaces, we need gardens, we need open space to stretch ourselves, right? Architecture will evolve in so much as I think we're gonna be embracing more of open spaces and all those things. And also I think we're gonna need bigger spaces. We're gonna accept that life cannot be cooped up, right? And so we have to build more, build better. But I guess it's a good thing, because now we're appreciating daylight, we're appreciating nature, open air. So I think that's how it's gonna evolve. We're gonna need more of those things. We're gonna need more of nature in our lives.
And lastly, from Brian Steven Borja, may nakolekt na po ba na data that can highlight the impact of design in comparison to conventional hospital designs that we have right now?
I actually have a very interesting graph. I don't know why, maybe it just skipped earlier. But you can see actually how we were tracking, the growth of the pandemic. It was actually, and how it kind of like levels off with the construction of more and more facilities to serve the hospitals. Of course, that's not maybe the biggest thing, but I think it's also a factor in any way, because as we see now, especially in other countries that have kind of like handled this pandemic better, we need these kind of like intermediate spaces. Like for example, they have clinics in the US and all those things where mild patients and all those things, it's easier for them to access. They don't have to crowd out our hospitals. And yet it also has to be immediate in their communities. It has to be accessible. It's not about sending someone 50 kilometers away to isolate in a facility that they've never been to, or in a place they don't even know, right? And so it's about strengthening our communities, I think. And it shows, the more space we give, the more spaces we build, or the more we strengthen our local hospitals, if it does not lower the caseload, then it lowers the death rate. And that's really how this is going to end up. That's how this pandemic is probably going to end up. That we're going to be able to lower the death rate and the danger or the mortality from this pandemic, to make it something that is, if not good, then acceptable maybe. So it's about mitigation. And that's what our medical facilities are really for. It's about mitigating the impact, of anything like this sickness.
Yes, thank you for that. It's really nice to realize more than almost 2 years into the pandemic that institutions, our practices, our culture, we really have to adapt because art and design are both very empathic, very relevant. So it has to address the needs of current humanity of society. And with that, we would like to know more about what's next for the two institutions that we have with us this afternoon. So, Sir Ricky, share with us what's next for Fundacion Sanso.
Well, again, it's about identifying small communities. And this time around, we're focusing on the print community of our visual arts community. So a lot of them have not been able to have exhibitions over the past 2 years. And as an art form, printmaking is already at a disadvantage. So we're using technology and bringing their works online for the very first Fine Art Print Fair this October 15 to 25. So please watch out for that. We're very happy to bring that over because Mr. Sanso is also a printmaker, and so our other national artists like Ben Cab, so many other respectable artists.
What's next for WTA, Architect William?
Well, I think we're pushing our idea of social architecture into, okay, so how can we build a human environment? We always talk about our environment, about saving our environment, about nature. What about our human environment? What do we need for it to work, right? Especially in a mega city like Metro Manila. And so we've been kind of like exploring this idea of maybe how we're planning our cities with this kind of like top-down command and control structure does not work. Maybe since it's a human environment, since it's organic, it's biotic, it needs to be grown, it needs to be managed. And so maybe the idea of how our city actually grew with, these small barangays. And we saw with the pandemic how the barangays are so essential, in helping our communities, right? And maybe we have to strengthen these barangays. And that's how we actually grow a city, how we can actually manage our city. It's through the grassroots, maybe. And so that's what we're kind of like exploring right now, this idea of how we can, make our community stronger.
Central to what we're talking about this afternoon to wrap up, that as we aim to heal as a community of creatives and as humanity, we really need to explore forms and new practices in order to adapt to what's next. As parang in motion lahat we're all transgressing into an unknown future, and we really need each other in the community to survive. And so with that, we would like to thank our speakers for being with us and sharing this very vital message this afternoon. Maraming salamat, Sir Ricky, at maraming salamat, Architect William P. Also, thank you to our lucky winners of the Made Experience Box, Joshua Isaiah Balut and Brian Stephen E. Borja, as well as Erica S. Pulgar. Maraming salamat for asking your questions, and congratulations on winning the Made Experience Box. Earlier this week, we asked our followers about their self-care rituals during the pandemic, and here are some of the interesting answers that we received. From Kim Listones, I think the best self-care ritual that will surely help not only me but everyone else is having the time in talking and sharing our heart's content with our family. Thank you, Kim. It really does help to talk to other people about how you are or what you're going through. Don't forget to check in with your friends, family, loved ones, and most especially with yourself. Kamusta ka na ba? We also received an answer from Erica Castillo Juan, who has been taking care of herself by surrounding herself with things that bring her joy, like spending her time with kids, being a plantita, watching her favorite shows, and exercising. She reminds us that it's important to also take care of ourselves so we can take care of other people as well. Thank you, Kim and Erica, for sharing with us your self-care rituals. Please send us a message on Facebook to claim your Made Experience Box. Please continue the conversation online. Leave us a comment on Facebook or post a story on Instagram and tag us at Metrobank Art and Design. We would like to thank our advocacy partners, The Rank Magazine and Bio, for supporting today's event. please visit their websites to know more about how they're supporting Filipino creatives all over the country. We'd also like to thank our media partners, Art Plus Magazine, Philippine Star, Manila Bulletin, and Adobo Magazine, the world on creativity. Join us again next week for day 2 of the Made Spectrum Lecture Series. Next week, we will sit down and talk to creative professionals who use their platform for and to inspire social change. We'll see you here again in the Made Facebook next week. And for the meantime, have a happy weekend at marami pong salamat.